Hello, welcome back to Reformation and Revival Now. I'm Brother Kevin, and I shared in the last video about my journey in fasting. I shared with you how there were strongholds in my young life that started. One was independence. I wanted to be independent and self-sufficient. Two, I entered into the excess, gluttony. Three, I became addicted to music, almost of any type. Which of these things I just named are not necessarily bad of themselves. Four, sexual uncleanness. Enough said. Five, temper. I had a temper. And I didn't realize that as this was going on, that these would be little fortresses that would hinder my walk as I became more serious about being a disciple. Now, we've been taking our passage from Luke 9:23, which goes like this. If any man follow me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it. Now, in the kingdom, it's different than in the world. In the world, it's about consumption. In the world, it's about getting what you want, when you want it, how you want it. In the kingdom, it's different. For God so loved the world that he gave. Jesus said the Son of Man came to give his life, as a servant, to give his life a ransom. He came not to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for men. So the kingdom is different. So it's how we give our lives to God and to others. The first two commandments are not even about yourself. The first two commandments is thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So we see that there's something about your relationship with God that should transcend to your relationship with people, or that should be the manifestation. But how did God deal with these strongholds in my life? Well, it took years. First of all, I didn't know that these strongholds were there. Well, I knew they were there, but I didn't know how they were there, and I didn't know really how to get rid of it. I just white-knuckled it a lot. So I want to share with you this journey that God took me on the fast, and while I was on this fast, he began to show me certain things. He showed me like this little entity in my life that I served. And what it was gods of pleasure and comfort that ruled over me. And those things I just named, the independence, the food, the music, the uncleanness sexually, the temper, those were things that, whether they were good or whether they were bad, they ruled my heart in such a way where they became strongholds, and at times even strongholds of sin. And I mean sin in every sense of the word. So when I got born again at 17, I was free from all that. Didn't have any of that guilt, none of that. But I didn't understand this principle that Jesus says, if any man follow me, he must take up his cross, he must deny himself daily and take up his cross and follow me. So without self-denial, we cannot really engage closely to Jesus as even our heart's desire. Because the system is about indulgence, about doing it your way, on your terms. Now, Jesus is saying, first principle, you want to follow me? You must deny yourself. Self must be on the back burner. So during the fast, God began to show me. And as I got into the midway point, he said, you see how you've been doing your juice regimen? You didn't even like the way it tasted, but it was good for you. It sustained your body without really any pleasure. He says, but your body's been receiving dividends. And my energy grew. I had more endurance. I did have some problems when I first got onto it, but for the most part, I ended up having more strength, having more resilience, and even areas in my body where there was inflammation, my inflammation cleared up. Now he said, those things were good for you, but you didn't enjoy it at all. And I said, Lord, you're right. He says, so it is in the kingdom. Your flesh may not enjoy some of the things I tell you to do, but it's good for you. And something about that snapped a long time relationship I had with the God of pleasure and comfort. So what it did, it kind of did the domino effect, and it began to touch all these areas of independence, of gluttony, of sexual uncleanness, of temper, and even of music. Now I want to say some of those things are not wrong. Is there anything wrong with music of itself? Of course not. But it became an addiction to me. Is there anything wrong with sex? No. God made a woman's a person, made a woman's body to be beautiful. There's nothing wrong with a naked woman. But God forbids it because of sin and the flesh, because of these mechanisms we're talking about. But it's a beautiful thing. God made woman and man to be beautiful to each other. But it got into the point of indulgence and pleasure, it didn't matter. I want you to know this God of pleasure doesn't care what it is. It could be anything. If Satan puts a hook in you, he'll use anything. I know people that were whatnot collectors. They have to have a whatnot wherever they go. They didn't have any peace till they can get their whatnot. Some people are that way about coffee. They can't function. Mad, pushing stuff over because they don't have their coffee. I don't care what it is. But anytime something in your life enters the place of God, when you have to consult that thing before you've talked to God, you know there's a problem. I don't care what it is. And in my particular case, as long as it gave me pleasure or comfort, and as long as it was on my terms, it was okay. So anytime God wanted me to grow in any area of grace, I had to get the permission from my pleasures and comforts before I could do anything. And that would begin to be a great stronghold that brought me great sorrow. And I don't mind telling you, I've sorrowed over every one of these things. And let me share that with you. We'll have a third video because I can't finish it now. I wanted to be independent because I wanted to be in a place where I could provide for myself and have things on my terms. And I tell you, that becomes such a stronghold in relationships. If you can't work with a person and love them and need them on their terms because it's what they need, how will you ever develop? So I really became almost kind of an odd kid because I was so independent. It made me a loner. But that early seed of wanting to be independent, I said I'll be alone to have my strength, to have my security. If it's necessary, I'll be alone. Now, we want our children to be independent, of course. But it's just that I love the pleasure of doing it my way and on my terms. I loved it. It gave me pleasure. But I didn't know that God of pleasure was beginning to form. And when I began to get into food, I began to race my brothers in finishing our meal so I could get the leftovers and a third one if I could. It just became to be a big charge. Whatever food I could stick into my stomach. I used to be able to eat 50 pancakes in one setting. I mean, it was gluttony. I was a full-blown glutton, and everybody laughed at it. It was a big joke. But it was a stronghold in my life because if I didn't have my food, I couldn't function. And if I didn't have certain foods, hey, I'm going to get mad. And when I got to where I got money, I had all the food I want, all the steak I want, all the fat I want, all the chitlins I want. Got to be a stronghold. Same thing with sexual sin. You know, in the early days, God tried to shield me from it. I had several involvements with pornography, but it was blocked. But in my daddy's job, I crossed that line and actually of my own volition, opened up those books. That's when something happened. When at an act of my will, I began to cross that line. Then it became a stronghold. Certain things are natural for a young man. You get up and you have your first, what they call wet dream, where you have that first experience, and all guys have them at a certain age. Well, in the beginning, it made me so dizzy, I was just wondering what it was. But it was very pleasurable. So now I said, what do I need to do to have this again? Uh-oh. Because remember, the seed of pornography has already been planted. So you can guess what kind of follows. Okay, so now I want to share with you, all these things I'm talking about is about pleasure. It's not about whether they're right or wrong. It's about pleasure. Let me repeat. It's not about whether these things are right or wrong right now. It's about pleasure. with music, I'd cut school so I could hear all of Beethoven's 9 symphonies from start to finish if I could get away with it. So I end up playing hooky from school because you can't get through Beethoven's 9th Symphony on the lunch hour. Or then I was in the Blue Note jazz thing. I had to have Wayne Shorter on. I had to have Miles Davis on. I was a music junkie. I had to have Indigati Aviti on. I had to have anything I could get my hands on. Pleasure was the name of the game. Same thing with temper. I loved the flash of sudden temper more than anything. See white light. This rush would come to me. It would often come to me when I get in fights. And I could kill a person during that time. So I want you to know that it wasn't about the fact that it was right or wrong. It was about the fact that it gave me pleasure. Even though some of it was sick and twisted, it didn't matter. It gave me pleasure. So during this fast period, God began to show me, once you break the gods of pleasure and comfort, then you no longer serve pleasure. Is there anything wrong with pleasure? No. But it wasn't, God never made those things for us to serve it. So once he broke them, I began to experience almost something just as great as when I was born again. And that was this witness of the Spirit that I am totally given over to God. So I just want you to know this was the most fruitful thing. And in the next video, I'll share with you some of the benefits. All right, I'll be right back. Bye-bye.